Welcome to There Is a Method to the Madness. My name is Rob Maxwell and I'm an exercise physiologist and personal trainer. I'm the owner of Maxwell's Fitness Programs and I've been in business since 1994. Welcome to today's show. I'm going to have a little fun today talking to you about trends and fads and what works, because that was a question or a statement brought up to me. And I think it's a really, really good idea. So I may or may not have mentioned to you in the past that I grew up down in New Smyrna Beach, Florida. I was actually born in a very small town in New York, in the farm country in the mountains of New York, named Gardner. Beautiful, beautiful place. I moved here when I was 10, and here being New Smyrna Beach. And I like to go down there a lot. I live in Port Orange now, which is really, really close, but I like to go down to New Smyrna. I just know the town so well. And I'll go down Canal Street sometimes when I'm heading over to the beach side or somewhere over there. And, I'll look over to the left and there's still this little old gym. It's been bought and sold a million times, and it's definitely in a slightly different location. It's now a little bit further west on Canal Street. But since the time I can remember being a little kid down there, 10, 11 years old, there was a gym, an old-fashioned bodybuilding style, you'd almost call it maybe like boxing gym on Canal Street. And it's a little bit more modernized now, and it's a little different ownership and everything, but there's still a gym there. And then when I travel over to the beach side and I go down to the inlet down in the North Beach of New Smyrna, there's this beautiful, what would you call it? I guess a boardwalk. It's 1.5 miles of wood kind of going out over the beach, and it's absolutely beautiful out there. And a lot of people run on it and walk on it. And again, as a little kid, I can remember riding my bicycle down there and running around sometimes, and people have been using that forever to exercise on. So here are these old great foundations of exercise and still pumping along. Weight training on Canal Street and the boardwalk where people run and walk down there. So that's pretty cool. That's the opposite of a trend and a fad. And I did a little research for today's show because I find all this stuff to be really interesting, and I love looking at the history of exercise and all that. So first, let's talk about things that work. The oldest recorded form of exercise as far as being structured is yoga, which goes back thousands and thousands of years. And if you ever notice, for the most part, I'm trying to think as I say this if I know of any inconsistencies in this statement, but I don't think so. That when people get into yoga, they stay in yoga. So you may know people that have been doing yoga forever and they just do it. And that's the opposite of a trend. That's the opposite of a fad. They're just into yoga. So it's been around for, as I said, thousands and thousands of years, and it's still going like really, really strong. And people that do it, again, seem to be doing it consistently, and they look the part, they live the part, and I think that's the most important thing. And you ever notice that people that get into running, it's kind of the same thing. Like they start out and they fall in love with it, or they fall in love with the results from it because it works so well. It's such a great calorie burning exercise. It's so great for the mind. It gets the serotonin levels up, it gets the endorphins going, which I'm sure the same thing happens for people that do yoga. I've just never really done a lot of it, but it works, so people stay with it. One of my dear friends and clients who passed last July, Reed Hughes, lived a very, very long, productive, great life, a mentor of mine, an actual, a literal hero to our area of environmental causes, and just a great, great man. He fell in love with running, and from the time I met him, he was in his late 60s, and he was running then, and he ran pretty much all the way up until the end. He just loved it. He also lifted weights, but running was his thing, and he stayed in shape his whole life. The entire time I knew him, it wasn't like it was a lifestyle. It wasn't like I'm just going to run and then quit. He was a runner. He just happened to love it. That was his deal. And the big running, I guess you'd call it craze, but it's one that stayed around, really began in the 1970s. And then Nike helped push it along in the 80s. But basically, people started to kind of care about their health a lot more. The wellness movement started in the 70s and 80s, and running really started to kick off. And, it's been happening ever since with absolutely no decline at all. If anything, well, not if anything, it's absolutely growing as a sport and as a hobby. And then we can go way back and look at weight training. Since the beginning of time, there's been different forms of resistance training. If you ever notice the statues and paintings of the Greek gods, they were portrayed as these manly men and very strong, very fit, and sculptured types of physiques. And when you go back and study a lot of the lives, there was a lot of things done, to promote muscle building back then, a lot of heavy work, lifting of rocks, lifting of boulders. But everybody in those days were, as far as the medical leaders, were proponents of strength training. So that goes way, way back. So that's something that's here to stay. Now let's look at the opposite of that, which I found to be kind of an interesting list here. It's pretty funny. I can remember these going way back. So let me first give you a definition. There's a trend and a fad. And I used to teach this when I taught sports medicine and the business classes. So we tend to look at trends and see where they're going, and there's different trends every year put out in the fitness industry, I'm sure in every industry. And a trend is defined as a general direction that things seem to be moving. Now, a trend can stay moving in the direction, or it can fade away. So we look at trends. We tend not to look at fads, all right? A fad is defined as an intense and widely shared enthusiasm for something, especially one that is short-lived and without any basis in the object's qualities. Simply put, a craze. So that is what a fad is, kind of like a fad diet, as I've spoken about before. It's a craze. So here are some of the fads, and obviously there's a method to the madness of why I bring up such silly fads, because I want you to start to identify them today. Obviously, they will be a little bit different. So one of the first ones in the 1950s, and I'm sure you've seen it on some of the silly TV shows and commercials, and believe it or not, I've seen it come up recently again on other commercials. In other words, they're trying to bring it back, but it's called jiggling. Yes, jiggling. That's where you put that obnoxious band-looking belt on your stomach and you get into a machine, and it jiggles the fat and cellulite right off of you. I wish I had $1 for everybody that tried it. You might be thinking, who did that? Millions of people did that. Yes, millions of people thought they can jiggle the fat off of their body. And by the way, a little side note for you. So I was doing my research. It mentioned cellulite a lot. Cellulite is just fat. That's all it is. It's fat you can see. That's what fat looks like. It's got that little dimply look to it. Cellulite is fat. Cellulite is not a special fat. There is nothing that gets rid of cellulite, i.e. the old Thighmaster. Yep, number 2. Well, these aren't in any order. I just listed a bunch of them going through. But the Thighmaster came out a little bit later. It was probably the 1970s, because the absolutely beautiful Suzanne Somers did the Thighmaster. And obviously that's why any of us males ever bought one. I never bought one. Scratched up from the record. I did not buy a Thighmaster. But if I was, it would have been because she was so beautiful and sweet. Who doesn't like Suzanne Somers? And she actually has written a pretty good book in the last couple of years. But, she was just the actress that sold the Thighmaster. But Thighmaster was intended to put between your legs and squeeze it a bunch of times, and it's going to get rid of your inner thigh cellulite, which again, no such thing as spot reduction, and there's really no such thing as cellulite. So that was a pretty funny fad, wasn't it? How about P90X? Oh my goodness. I even had clients that just would finish it up, or they say they're going to take a break from training. This was probably in the mid-90s, and they're going to just do some P90X. I'm like, okie dokie. So P90X was basically they send you, I don't even know how, because back then it was before internet, I think, but you get a workout, and it's a different workout all the time, and it's supposed to make it more entertaining and less boring, and you do something different every day. And again, it's not that these things are necessarily bad, it's just that was a fad, and it's actually listed as number 2 fitness fad. So everybody was doing P90X, and then everybody didn't do P90X, and then they didn't do anything, and then they put on weight, right? We see it all the time. Rollerblading, how about that bad boy? Nothing wrong with roller skating, nothing wrong with ice skating, nothing wrong with any of those things. Nothing really wrong with rollerblading. It's a good form of cardio, but remember, everybody's rollerblading because not only was it activity, but it was just like cool to put on those rollerblades, which I could still remember trying to do it now, and oh God, thank God there wasn't any iPhone video cameras back then, but it didn't do anything special other than move, and rollerblading is kind of bye-bye, right? The old ab roller. Now I had one at the gym. Why? It's just an easy way to do crunches, but that's all it was. But of course the commercial said it works the lower belly of your abdominals, reducing that fat, which of course is ludicrous, no such thing, but people bought them and bought them and bought them. Why? Because it's easy. How about Body by Jake? Remember that guy? I think he got sued, didn't he? I don't know, something happened with that guy. I think he got sued or got into some argument, maybe with that Tony guy. Remember him, the guy with blonde hair, Tony Little, I think. Anyway, both of them were out there. I think Tony Little still is. He was the dude with the blonde mullet, I think. And he'd get out there and yell at you. And by the way, I never thought he was in very good shape. That it was kind of like, I looked at him, I'm like being judgmental as sort of a bodybuilder, I'm like, yeah, he's kind of puffy. Matter of fact, he was really puffy. But I don't know, he had the look and he yelled, and it looked like he could sell things, and I'm sure he did. I mean, people are dumb. I mean, they're just going to buy stuff, and it's pretty easy to sell to the people around here. To tell you the truth, people in our country will buy anything up if they think it's a shortcut, and that's what they thought they were getting. Unfortunately, it's a shortcut that doesn't work. Let's see, Tybo, remember that one? Old Tybo, that was the special, I think it was kind of like a boxing style thing to get in shape. Again, nothing wrong with these things. Boxers are in phenomenal shape, but they're in phenomenal shape because of what they do, not because of the way they necessarily train. They train all kinds of ways, and they eat well. Boxers are great. I got a long history of boxers in my family. I boxed. Boxing is a very physical sport. It's going to make you incredibly physically fit if you follow the protocols. But it was sold as this is the way, and then all these people would get these gloves. I remember, they don't only put it on their gloves, and it was like, oh my goodness, it was ridiculous. But that's what people were doing. Then 8-minute abs. Remember that one? Just 8-minute abs. That was the exercise. I mean, now you could look at this two ways. If you're doing your abs for 8 minutes from a realistic standpoint, you're doing too much abdominal training, honestly, but that's not how it was sold. It was sold that's all you have to do. All right. Then I'll just finish off with one of the newer ones, which is Tabata. Now, Tabata is a great interval because I put it on my phone and it's just a good app to get you moving. But Tabata as a fad was invented by a guy by the name of Dr. Tabata, who is Japanese, and he came up with this concept, and he studied it. I'd really have to look at the full studies to believe this, but basically he said 4 minutes of exercise, because that's what a Tabata set works out being. It's 20 minutes, 20 seconds of an interval, 10-second rest, and that's repeated over 4 minutes. So basically 8 Tabatas. And again, I'll use it for different core training or different exercises. It's a cool little interval. It just gets in a lot of reps with barely any rest. But the point is, as far as being a fad, was it was sold as just do 4 minutes of this and that's it. So go run for a 4-minute Tabata and you're good. And of course, that's ridiculous. So, what can you pick up on today that's going on? Oh, one of the latest trends that's not a fad, it's been trending for a while too, actually. HIIT, HIIT, which I talked about the difference between high intensity interval training the other day versus high intensity training. One of them is more strength based, which is HIIT. HIIT is more cardio based. And there's some truth to it, like it's a way to do intervals, but the way it is sold is that it is better than doing like longer bouts of exercise. So a lot of bodybuilders started pushing it because number one, you got to remember, bodybuilders do not like to do cardio, so they just hate it. So they would rather knock out 15 minutes of HIIT than 60 minutes of slow-paced jogging or walking. They just hate cardio. I'm generalizing here. So then it gets sold, well, you only have to do this. And there's some truth. If you're going to go shorter, you can go harder and make up for going shorter. So it's not that it's bad. It's just that, I think some of the belief behind it is a little faulty in that we can always shortcut things and get what we want. So that's been trending because people, I hate to tell you, just don't want to work, is the bottom line. The other one, of course, is Peloton. That's been big trend. It's definitely starting to cool off, and there's been economical and financial issues with Peloton as far as that goes. We knew that wasn't going to stay peaking forever. But again, it's just this new cool thing that, a lot of the triathlete friends I have, they have these types of trainers that they hook their bikes up to, and they get interactive protocols like that. Theirs is mostly on a computer though, and they can like ride the Pyrenees and different things, and it simulates real rides. So I'm not saying these things are bad. I mean, that's not bad at all, and that's similar to Peloton getting some motivation and all that. So there's exercise bikes have been around forever. Trainers, putting your bike on a trainer's been around forever. It's just thinking though that there's something special about it, like, oh, this Peloton is going to be, and this programming is going to be so much better than if I just got on my spin bike and created my own workouts 4 or 5 days a week. Well, no, it's not better. It just maybe gets you in the saddle. So that's a trend. I wouldn't call it a fad. But the moral of the story is, as I talked about, if you look at the things that have lasted, they're all about putting in the work. And eating healthy, of course, is putting in the work too. And I have a client, and he said this since I've known him, and that's been over 22, 23 years. And when we talk about different subjects and probably diet and exercise and whatever, I think this saying goes in a lot of different areas. He always says, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. And there is so much truth to that. And that's why these companies come out with things, because they know that. I mean, every top business has a marketing guy that majored in either psychology or sociology, so they know how people think. And if you look at the fitness industry, basically they're going to look at people that go, well, they want to jump from this to this to this because they're looking for the easier, softer way. Everybody know, the ones that really get it and hold on to it, meaning they get into the shape they want to, and then they hold on to it, they absolutely just figured it out. This is going to take work. I have to prioritize. There is no shortcuts. People, if they could, they'd take a pill, I think most people, and then say, this is all I have to do. People don't want to have to put in the work. And I know that sounds cynical and it sounds judgmental, but it's absolutely true. We all have lazy days. I can't stand it when people think, well, you get up and you probably can't wait to get out the door. It's like, nope. To sit there and kind of like do some tricks to get myself moving sometimes too. There are some things that I get out the door more enthusiastically for, and then there are other things that I don't. So something I notice about myself, I know myself very well, is even though it's cooler early in the morning before the sun comes up, when I run, Walking doesn't really affect me because I don't really notice a pace when I walk. I do walk at a certain pace, and I usually start my walking or whatever by walking my dog Hazel. So, but I'll notice when I run, there's just a different mood involved with me. When the sun's not up, even though it's a little cooler, I'm just not feeling it. It takes work for me to get out the door. I mean, I'll be more mad at myself if I don't do it, and my mood will be affected, and I won't be a happy camper if I don't do it. So I do it, but it takes work. So in mornings when I have an early client, like this morning, actually, you're hearing this on a Wednesday, but this is a Tuesday when I'm making this. I have a client on a Tuesday morning early, and he's always here before I get here. He gets to the gym and he starts running out back, whatever. So I know I got to be here, which means I have to get out the door and be finished long before the sun comes up. So it's dark, and it affects me. So I'm like, I'll get up and I'll have a cup of coffee and I'll sit there and I do a little journaling, do a little reading. I'm like, oh God, I got to get this in. It's not easy, and it's not pleasurable by any means. And then like on the weekends, if I run, I'll usually run after I bike, and we call it a brick workout. But the sun's always up and it's hotter, but my run and my pace is so much better because I just don't like the dark. It's just something with that with me. I like that vitamin D, I guess. So it's harder for me to do it, but I do it, right? So this whole point isn't about whether Coach Rob likes the dark or the light. This is about, it's not easy for us. I have friends that are hooked on exercise. They love exercise. They make themselves get to the pool. They make themselves get in their workout. It's not easy. We have to be willing to put in the time. The American College of Sports Medicine says we need, and I think they're being very conservative, but they say we need at least 30 minutes of cardiorespiratory endurance 5 times a week, at least. So none of these little 8-minute abs, none of these, Body by Jakes, none of these, things that are trying to tell you less is better. I mean, with everything, there's a point of diminishing returns. So no, 2 hours is not better for the average person not training for something of a really long event. Is not better than 30 minutes, no. But 8 minutes isn't better than 30, okay? So we need to put in enough work. And I always say, an hour a day I think is a really, really good balance for almost everybody. And yeah, you deserve it. And yes, you can do it. Go an hour. Yeah, an hour, man. I mean, come on, out of all the waking hours, how much time do you waste doing other things? And I do the same thing. Get out and move. I mean, I'd rather see everybody out there with their mind on their exercise, sure, but if you really feel like, you've got to be checking your emails on your phone first thing, I mean, you can get out there and do your walks doing that. Maybe then you get warmed up and you put it away, but yes, you can do it. There are no shortcuts, but the beautiful news is it is worth it. It's gonna work and it's worth it, but you gotta put in the time. You simply have to put in the time, and time is what we all have in common. I learned that in philosophy class long ago. We all have 24 hours in a day. How are we gonna use it? Are we going to use it doing needless things, or are we going to do it doing essential things? And exercise is essential, my friends. All right. So, speaking of that, let me thank our sponsors, because without them, you don't get to hear me ramble on, and you're just going to have to listen to it. Our first ones are greatest because they were our first. They believed in us absolutely first. Jonathan and Lynn Gilden at the Gilden Group at Realty Pros. Not only do they sponsor the podcast, but they're also sponsoring the MaxFit Games. They work out with us. I mean, I can't appreciate them enough. And they are so good. Jonathan and Lynn are a married couple who just do great work in real estate. They can be reached at 386-451-2412. Whether you need to list your house or find a place, give them a shout. Or thegildengroup.com. And our new sponsor, who I also greatly appreciate, and I love their vegetarian dishes. And they are Istanbul Turkish Mediterranean Cuisine, and they're located right here in Ormond Beach at 488 South Young Street, Ormond Beach, 32174. And they can be reached at 386-492-7100. or you can place an order at istanbulflorida.com.